At some point, most of us navigate loss. Life often takes us on different paths in both life and birth than we envisioned. Today's guest not only navigated that profound loss of a partner, but she embarked on a remarkable journey of healing, pleasure, and solo pregnancy and birth at the age of 49. She's here to share her story of resilience, courage, and self-discovery as we explore grief, conception, and the power of pleasure in the face of adversity. Get ready to be inspired by her strength, wisdom, and unwavering determination. Hi, I'm Deborah Pascali-Bonaro, founder and director of Orgasmic Birth and host of the Orgasmic Birth podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to our incredible guest, whose work has transformed the lives of countless individuals navigating some of life's most profound transitions. Britt Fohrman is a doula, embodiment coach, yoga teacher, and birth educator with over 2 decades of experience supporting nearly 500 births in the San Francisco Bay Area. Drawing from deep practices in Buddhism, hypnosis, tantra, and shamanic traditions, Britt has dedicated her life to helping people prepare for birth and parenting through self-awareness, relaxation, and the power of pleasure. Her unique approach blends mindfulness, breath work, somatic practices, and meditation, creating a safe and loving space where individuals and families can reclaim their inner power and embrace pregnancy and birth as a conscious rite of passage. Whether it's stepping into motherhood, healing from loss, or expanding into sexual power, Britt guides her clients to live a life aligned with their desires, intuition, and authentic values. Welcome, Britt. I am so honored to have you join us today. And I really want to start by offering my deepest condolences for the loss of your husband.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm really delighted to be here and I appreciate that.
And I know that this has been an incredible journey for you, coming from so much wisdom as a birth worker all these years and then embarking on your own journey. Can you share kind of a little bit where that journey began and how it's brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I always knew I wanted to be a mother. It was kind of like a guiding element through my whole life. And I never even really questioned it until I met my husband, and he was in his 50s, and he was like, why do you want this so bad? And I had to actually articulate that and actually question it. And I came out on the other side. I'm like, no, I really want this. This is really important to me. And my mother had a very positive birth with me in 1975 and always told me the most positive story about her natural birth in the hospital. And that just kind of set me up for this, I think, just confidence and trust in birth. Like in my entire life, I never questioned birth. And when I became a doula in about 2000, I just brought that unwavering confidence and trust and relaxation in birth. And of course, I was a yoga teacher and, a body worker at the time. And so I had, a groundedness and an ease in my body. And so I just started supporting all these people. And I was like, I cannot wait to have this experience. I want to have it so badly. And he and I, very shortly after we started being together, because I was in my 40s, he was in his 50s, we tried to start having a baby, and we got pregnant really easily, even though I was in my early 40s, but we subsequently kept losing the babies. And it was very trying, but it was also like, I never wanted to stop. It was like he would get kind of like, knocked down by it, I'd be like, okay, when can we start trying again? Like it was really clear to me that this was my mission, that I wanted to get to have this experience that I held so many people through. And so even in the loss of my husband, that was the one thing that kept me looking forward in life. You know, when he died, I felt myself also die in a way. And but I had this baby, I had this like baby that was calling me, and this very strong urge to be a mother. And we had some of his sperm that had been frozen from a prior IVF cycle. And that was his last wish, was for me to keep going. And so when he died, I knew that that was the thing that would kind of carry me into the next phase of my life, was that, you know, I would, at least I would have a baby. Like I would have a baby and it would be his baby, and I would get to have this experience that I've always wanted to have. And so I'm proud to say that I have a 3-month-old baby now.
Oh, what an incredible journey. I mean, we both have a little tear in our eyes,
Yeah.
but as so incredible to have such a profound loss of your husband, but to kind of take that into the blessing, right, of continuing to go on and to have your baby. So, and at 49 too,
Yeah.
so lots to think about. So can you talk a little bit of how you found healing and how your pregnancy was? What were things that supported you at that time?
Yeah. So right after he died, I knew that I needed to change my life. I knew I needed to find a way to really support myself. And at the time, I had to take a break from working with pregnant people. And because I, you know, of course, it would just like bring up grief. Like I'd walk down the street and I'd see a pregnant woman and I'd start crying, or I'd see babies and I'd start crying. And so I knew I needed to like shift my career a little bit. And so I enrolled in a sex, love, and relationship coaching program with Layla Martin. And, um, and I just embarked on this healing journey. Like the whole beginning, the whole first 3 or 4 months of the program is all about self-healing with pleasure. And so I took my grief and I took my pain and my loss, and I learned how to heal it with pleasure. And it became my power, like, you know, to go from having such a profound, painful, destructive loss, that, you know, just I knew that it could ruin me. I knew that it could be the end of, you know, Brit as you know it. And I had to like choose the way that I was going to come back to life. And I've always had an orientation towards pleasure. I've always like I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. So I like always look towards like, you know, what's the bright side, but I had to go into the darkness. And I went into the darkness, like as deep into the darkness as you could go, but with the support of pleasure. And that's really what tantra is, right? It's like you go into the most taboo, the most dark, the most gritty places, and you can see that there's God there. You can see that there is divinity, that there's sacredness, that there is life force energy in the darkest places. So, and this, of course, as we were talking about before we started recording, this is kind of like a theme in my life now, right? You know,
Right.
through the loss of Eric, through the pregnancy, through the conception, through the pregnancy, through the birth, through the postpartum. And so I learned that pleasure was my greatest power. And I know this is your whole jam and this is what you talk about. And so I literally came back to life experiencing more joy and more pleasure than I'd ever felt in my entire life. Literally, like I was more turned on, I felt more sexually alive, like more in love with myself, because I didn't have my husband anymore, right? To be the vehicle of love, I had to love myself as deeply as he loved me. So I learned how to really hold myself and love myself through the pleasure work. And that was literally like the foundation of this pregnancy. So as I was going into so I conceived this baby through egg donor IVF. So I used my husband's sperm, which we had left over. And I got an egg donor because I'm old and I lost so many pregnancies with my own eggs. So it was like, no, those are off the table now. And so I got a nice young egg donor, and even the night before I was going through the IVF in this past January, so almost a year, actually a year to the day, January 2nd. Yeah,
Oh my goodness, what an honor to be celebrating today with you with your story.
to realize that I'm getting chills. Yeah.
Totally. I just felt
Yeah.
that rush through me. Wow.
Yeah, so a year ago today, I was going through my IVF, but the night before, I did one of the practices that I learned through my program that I take my clients through, which is called sex magic. I'm sure you know about it. It's a
Yes.
tantric manifestation practice. And I did the sex magic with my jade egg as sort of like a welcoming and envisioning of me having a healthy baby. And so that was like the imprint that I went into my IVF with. And it was successful. And then I went into this pregnancy, which was just absolutely the most grueling, like challenging, like, crawling on my hands and knees kind of experience. But all the way through, I just used pleasure as my resource. And so my self-pleasure practice just became stronger and stronger and stronger. And I just really, even when I was feeling sick for almost the entire, up until like 30 weeks, I was feeling pretty awful. But I just kept focusing on pleasure, whether it was the pleasure of rubbing my belly or the pleasure of, an actual hands-on pleasure practice, or the pleasure of swimming in the ocean, or the pleasure of getting body work. I just kept focusing, like, where can I bring pleasure to support me through this really hard time? Because I was missing my husband, and I had to move homes, and I was leading 4 retreats, and I was working really hard to prepare for my maternity leave, and I just kept, oh, and I was launching an online course.
Oh my goodness. Birthing many things.
God, I can't even believe how much I accomplished in the past year. It's kind of amazing. Um, but and that the online course actually was a really big piece because I was putting together what pretty much everything that I've learned over 20 something years of being a doula and a birth educator. Um, I was putting this course together, and so I was going through the course, and the whole course is about how your relationship with your yoni, your pussy, your vagina, whatever you want to call it, is really the portal to, birthing your baby. And most people are very disconnected from that part of their bodies, and therefore have a hard time when the baby's trying to get out. They're disoriented because they don't really know the landscape through which the baby's being born. And so I spent my entire pregnancy deeply, deeply in reverent communion with my yoni. Like I've never been more like sexually alive and embodied and connected in my life. And that was like what helped me like handle all the bitterness, all the difficulty, all the stress and the strain and the fear and so much negativity comes at you when you're over 40 trying to have a baby. It's just like, even though I was planning a home birth and I declined obstetric care for most of the pregnancy, I still, I knew all that stuff because I had been a doula. So it was really the pleasure work that kept me in the place that felt safe and relaxed and confident and connected and really willing to be open, right? It's all about opening, birthing our babies one way or another.
Yeah,
And
on
so,
every level.
yeah, literally. And for me, it was like way more opening than, I had even envisioned. So it was the pleasure work was everything to me. And I'm just so excited to, continue to share that now that I'm on the other side.
Yes. And I love how you say that pleasure is such a healing element, right? And yet, most people in healing don't consider pleasure, and yet it's vital. So, your story is so powerful how you were able to use pleasure. And I love Layla Martin. So, just another shout out to her and her sex magic and all her work. So, can you take us forward? You had this challenging, blissful, pleasurable, healing pregnancy, and labor began. What was that like for you, and what was that process? I'm sure many emotions.
Oh my God, I just got chills when you asked it. So, in retrospect, when I started to do some birth processing, because I needed a lot of process after the way that my birth went, I had a session with one of my colleagues. Her name's Raisa Trend, and she practices Pam England's modality of birth story listening. And that was absolutely one of the most supportive elements. I had many other people doing processing with me, my home birth midwife, my doula, who's also a shaman, and a hypnotherapist. I really knew I needed to process what happened to me right away because it was so big and so different than what I had anticipated and what I had prepared for. So, what became really clear, and I will get to actually what happened, but what became really clear was that actually my whole pregnancy and especially the weeks leading up to the birth were part of the birth story. That it was a whole journey, a whole heroine's journey. And the biggest, like, kind of most intense portal actually for me was waiting for my baby to arrive. I was convinced that my baby was going to come early because I have all these fibroids and all the medical people are like, oh, you're gonna have preterm labor. And I don't know why. I just thought I was gonna have this baby early. And I got to 37 weeks and I was having practice surges, but the baby wasn't coming. And my midwives were like, you need to get this baby in your pelvis. And of course, they had the pressure of, I was breaking all the rules. I knew very well that I was, in the medical model, that I stopped even talking to them after 32 weeks because they kept putting all this pressure on me about induction and all the horrible things that could happen to me and my baby. And so I was like, I can't listen to any of you. I need to stop. Every time I had an appointment or an ultrasound to check on my baby, I was like, I had to have another appointment or two to undo it. I had to talk to my midwife and talk to my doula. I had to have some kind of process. So I was like, okay, screw this. I can't do this anymore. I know my baby's healthy. So anyway, so I was doing everything I could to get my baby to move down. And she wasn't engaging in the pelvis. And, I'm a prenatal yoga teacher. I've been a doula for over 20 years. I know all the tricks, right? And so we were doing everything. And I had everyone on my team, trying to help figure out why is the baby not moving down. And I got like past 40 weeks and I was just like, oh shit, it must be because the anniversary of my husband's death is approaching. So the anniversary of his death was 5 days after my guest date. And so I was like, okay, maybe we have to get through the death portal first. And so I had to go through all the emotion of meeting the third anniversary of his death and going through that. And I was like, okay, maybe a baby will come now. No baby. And then at some point I was like, okay, why is she not moving? There's got to be, I didn't know the sex of my baby. So I just did everything and I just was praying, praying, praying. And I got to 41 weeks and I was just, baby wasn't coming. And I finally decided to do some non-stress tests just to make sure the baby was fine. Everything was perfect and nothing was happening. And so we tried castor oil 3 times and labor didn't start, even though I got to have the fun of castor oil 3 times, 3 nights.
Oh no.
Yeah, like to the point where it got so intense, my midwife even came over once, my doula came over once. It was really, really intense. But baby wasn't coming. And at some point I was like, okay, there's something up. And I had this feeling that though I was planning this, ecstatic home birth in the water, surrounded, I literally had 8 women on my birth team and all different, like close friends, midwives, doulas, photographer. I had the whole I was going to broadcast my birth on Zoom to like my wider circle. I was going to record it in every way. And baby wasn't coming. And I, I got to 41 weeks and everything was fine. I could feel her and I was listening to her with a Doppler, which I used to totally judge, but now I understand why people do that. Um, and so at 42 weeks and a day, we decided to go get induced. Um, and I started off the induction having a dance party with my bestie. And, it was just like, bringing like the high vibes and the pleasure energy and having fun, and had the Foley balloon in me. And I was dancing around my room, and, we were like bumping and grinding and laughing and singing. And the labor, as soon as it started to kind of like take off, I just felt like something was not right. And, baby was looking fine on the monitor, but something was not right. And so, but everyone's like, oh, everything's fine. Anyways, long story short, I had a feeling that something wasn't right. And it progressed. I wasn't progressing. I wasn't opening. Baby wasn't moving down. Every time we checked, baby didn't budge. So even in the 5 weeks prior of doing everything possible to get baby to move, and the labor, everything possible to get baby to move, no movement. And so at some point, we decided to go for a cesarean because we had been in the induction land for a day and a half, and I wanted to be the one that made that choice. And I didn't want to be like rolled down in an emergency. She was starting to get stressed out by Pitocin. She actually hated Pitocin. And I had all these fibroids. And so we kind of knew that that could present an issue. But I really wanted to just make sure I did everything possible to have the birth that I wanted to have. And this has always been my approach with my clients, is like take every little bit of places where I had control, places where I could contribute to my experience. I did everything possible. And I got to that point and I was like, I can't even believe that I'm saying this, but I think that we have to call it because she's getting stressed and I don't want it to be an emergency. And when they opened me up and took her out, she was so wrapped up in her cord that she literally had nowhere she could go. And like they were like, she would not have been born. and and so it was just, it was a devastating experience for me because I wanted that, ecstatic birth. I was really looking forward to it. And it was really hard. It was really, really hard as someone who's dedicated her life. I mean, my course is called Preparing Your Vagina for Birth. Like I am like the queen of promoting vaginal birth. And here I was having a cesarean and I felt so sad and I felt like I failed, even though I knew I didn't. But when I did that birth story processing with Raisa, one of the things that came up was like, I fucking triumphed. Like I triumphed because I had a healthy baby and a healthy pregnancy at 49 years old, and that I stayed healthy, and then I made every single choice in my pregnancy. Like I made those choices, and I kept I mean, I had gestational diabetes. I had, like I was old. I did IVF. I was high risk like 4 times over. And I went to 42 weeks and 3 days without preeclampsia, without any like health problems. And to me, when I look back at the whole experience, it's like I was healthy. I never felt so healthy in my life. And that made me really proud that I did such a good job with that. And I mean, there's so much more to say, but I'll just like pause there and let it all sink in because it's, it was a really, really harrowing journey, but I feel really proud to be on the other side of it and really proud that I created, such a beautiful pregnancy and such a beautiful child.
And I want to say, I am just smiling to hear that you're proud because I'm proud of you, and I'm sure listeners are. You are a heroine. Your strength, your determination, creating the space, the health, and to honor that your baby chose this path, right? I mean, I think sometimes, right, we get so caught up in our desires, and our babies have desires and needs for safety. So, what a journey to be able to step aside from your desires to birth your babe the way that she needed. And then I really applaud you for taking the time to process, to know that there should not be shame or blame, that there is this exploration, and that people are there to support you in uncovering the gifts that you brought. You dug deeper than you ever knew you'd have to birth her in a way that she needed. And to see you a few months later now, to be able to stand in that power, to heal some of that, is just such a gift for us today. And I hope it's taking you deeper into celebrating you.
It is indeed. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I know that for many people, so important to hear, because so many people in birth are asked more than they could have imagined, or it takes a different path, like you said, the need for a cesarean. But you sure explored every option. And I do want to say that is such an important piece too, right? And you were amazing in that, Britt, to have really listened to your heart and your baby and your desires in the whole approach.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the things that I had already known because I had gone through the death of my husband and the loss of I had four pregnancy losses before
Oh, I'm
Isidore
sorry.
was born. And I knew that I was resilient. I knew, and I know a lot of people, birth is their first initiation where they discover that they're resilient, or they're asked to, learn about their resilience. But for me, I had learned that already. So I knew that I was going to find my way, but at the time it was really, really hard. And working with the grief, really, really giving myself permission to have grief about my birth, even though my baby was healthy. And, one of the things that has always angered me as a doula and a birth educator is when people say to the birthing person, oh, well, at least you have a healthy baby. And my mother and so many people would say that to me after I was born, because they were just so focused on like, oh, we were healthy, we were alive, we made it through. And I understand that it's a well-meaning comment, but it undermines the experience of the birthing person, and does not give that person permission or invitation to really say how they feel. And so luckily I was surrounded by people that understood that the way that I gave birth mattered to me, and the way that I felt about it was important, and that it was worthy of process, and worthy of acknowledgement. That for me was traumatic, and that I needed to have space and time to heal from that trauma and to come back around to myself. Like I was like kind of faking it, being in love with my baby at first, because I was so traumatized by what happened in my birth, and I didn't fill in all the details, that there was more. That's for another podcast. Um,
Yeah.
but um, but I really needed space held for me by all the people that held it. And also, I held it for myself. I gave myself permission to be disappointed, to be sad, to grieve that, this is the only baby I'm going to have. So I'm not going to get a do-over, right? And even if I did, I have all these fibroids, it's very possible that I'd have the same experience. And so I think that this is like one thing I really want to share with your listeners, is that your grief is valid, and that it deserves time and space to be felt, to be moved through, and that there's a tremendous like softening that happens in that grieving process, which we really need, because in parenting, in mothering, in taking care of a child, there's always going to be these portals of grief that we're going to have to go through with our identity, with our lifestyle, with our schedule, with our bodies. I'm still dealing with grief around my body right now. And so, grief is something that I've worked with a lot already in my coaching practice because I'm like now an expert after all the losses and my husband and all that. But now it's like I've had to have a whole nother experience with birth grief, and that's a real thing. So I just really want to validate anyone out there who's feeling grief or does feel grief about their birth, that it is worthy of attention.
Yes, so important. Thank you so much for sharing that, holding that space for you, and giving everyone the invitation and the permission to definitely seek that as well. So, can I ask you first, people that might be listening right now, some people are considering a pregnancy, some are pregnant and might be giving birth soon. What would be one other bit of wisdom? What would you want to leave them with in their thoughts and preparation?
Take time to really be intimate with your own body, to really like truly be in your body. Like I'm not talking like Peloton and CrossFit and all of that, but to like in a spiritual container, like maybe through prenatal yoga, through meditation. What I teach in my course is kind of a combination of yoga, meditation, dance, movement, breath, and self-pleasure. And that's my favorite way of being intimate with my body. It feels really, really good. But to
I
to
agree.
maintain that connection with your body, and if you're wanting a vaginal birth, to actually go to the place through which your baby is going to be born, or you hope that your baby is going to be born, and intimately connect with yourself. Know your body, because like for me to get to go to 40 weeks and beyond, the only way that I knew that it was okay was because I was in my body. And I was feeling, I was like, my body is so freaking healthy right now. Even though I couldn't walk because my ankles hurt so much and I was so tired, I knew that my body was healthy and that my baby was healthy. I could feel my baby. I could feel her because I was with her in this body. And so that's the main thing that I really want to emphasize is be in your body in a internal meditative way, not in a like a hardcore workout way. In fact, usually letting go of that stuff is important at the end of pregnancy so that you can be more inward, more soft, more juicy, more connected, and more introspective.
Beautiful advice for everyone. So I know people listening would love to hear more about your courses, how they can find you, follow you. Can you share a bit of what you're offering and where people can connect with you?
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram at the Juicy Ladies.
I
And
love your name.
I know it's pretty great, right? Well, I have a whole community that I started for women and non-binary people, that's outside of pregnancy and birth, where I lead retreats every summer and online courses and do coaching through the Juicy Ladies. And then also my website is brittfohrman.com, BrittFohrman.com, and that'll be in the show notes, I know. And there you can learn about my online course called Preparing Your Vagina for Birth. You can also just search for that. And Preparing Your Vagina for Birth is a self-study course to really help you be connected to your body, to be in your body, and to feel empowered through movement, through breath work, and also through understanding how your body works and how to work with it. So yeah, my website has everything you need to know, and there'll be a discount code for the course. Also, I'll give that to you so that people who are listening can get a little discount when they sign up for the course through Orgasmic Birth.
Thank you so much, Britt. Thank you for all your offerings, but thank you so much for your vulnerability to share today your loss. My condolences again, for your husband, but also for several miscarriages and for the grief and loss of what you were desiring for your birth. But today was a powerful talk of resilience and healing, and pleasure. So I thank you so, so much for joining us and sharing.
Thank you, Deborah. It's been a total delight to be here with you. I really appreciate you inviting me on.
Well, thank you. And thank you to all our listeners. We always love to hear from you. So tag both of us, the Juicy Ladies and Orgasmic Birth. What are you taking away? What are you going to birth forward into your life in any way? So please stay in touch, and we thank you all for listening along with us today, and we hope you'll join us next week for the next episode of the Orgasmic Birth Podcast. Bye.